Our PSB Presentation by Hugo Cambridge, Camford.
Alexander Sington, Sherborne.
Ryan Marr, Bryanston.
And Ethan Piper, Warminster.
First we'll have a look at each inquiry separately.
History. For our first inquiry, we did history and had to research about the Great Fire of London. We were only given 2 titles to choose from.
Overall, this meant we were not given much independence, though this might have been for the better, as it was scary diving straight in, especially since we had no experience. Soon I found my footing and got well away with the task.
I used collaboration to communicate with others and receive feedback from teachers. This was a great help for the start of the inquiry process, as it got me into the field of the inquiries.
After finishing my inquiry, I used reflection to look back and reflect on the mistakes I made, so I could do better in my geography. For example, I spent more time on it, so it wasn't last minute.
Geography. In our geography inquiry, we were set the task of making a presentation on the River Dart. The river was strong, and it was a challenge in itself to take our measurements without getting a face full of water. I think I used lots of collaboration and communication in this group task to make sure that everyone knew what we were doing and that everyone was included.
The learning power that I thought was most challenging was collaboration, because when we are gathering results for the inquiry, we need to get into the water, and it's hard to do something in the water compared to what we do in class. So we use a lot of communication to make sure everyone knew what they needed to do.
Because of this task, I have developed my communication and collaboration skills massively.
I came much more prepared for the inquiry and was much more vigilant in keeping to the timetable.
RS. In this inquiry, we could choose what topic we wanted to do an inquiry on. We developed a huge amount of independence, as we weren't offered any guidance.
I found that reflecting on my 2 previous inquiries helped me work harder at this one. For example, I worked on the inquiry more in preparation in the holidays, so I was ready to go.
I found that this inquiry was definitely the most challenging, as we had little help from teachers. This was tricky at first, but as we've had experience from this before, it wasn't as challenging as we expected.
I think that as we're so used to doing inquiries, I was able to cope with the timetable well compared to my previous inquiries.
Now we will talk about the PSB learning powers we used throughout the inquiry process.
Collaboration and communication. We use collaboration and communication mostly while we're in the dark one, collecting information for our inquiries. We used it to communicate with others and work with them collaboratively. When using collaboration, more people will be working on the task, and when doing it, it will be better and you'll be able to do it faster.
I use collaboration and communication when I become confused and ask my peer for help. I start to develop my collaboration and communication skills mainly in the geography inquiry phase. This is because I spend lots of time working in a group and communicating to complete the task.
I use collaboration and communication when receiving feedback from my teachers in my RS inquiry. This helped me improve, since a second opinion is always a good thing.
Independence. We use independence during all the inquiries we did. I think independence is the learning power that we use most since we were working on our own a lot. In my history, for example, I didn't use much of my free time to do it at the start. Soon, I fell behind, but I was able to catch up in my free time using independence. I'm glad I worked very hard at the end to catch up, and I finished the inquiry before the deadline.
I used independence by starting my geography inquiry in the holidays, so I was much further ahead.
I have used independence in my learning power presentations because I did them in my free time and all by myself. At the start of the inquiry process, I needed a huge amount of help as I was just starting to develop my independent skills. But now I feel I'm so much more independent and I'm always free to work by myself without any help.
Reflection. We use reflection all throughout the inquiries, especially after finishing them. This is because we learn from our mistakes and previous experiences to improve in the future. We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. John Dewey.
I have used reflection in the review and improve stage of the RS inquiry by looking back on how I can improve my work. When we were first doing our inquiries, I didn't even know what reflection was, so I thought it was meaningless. But now that my knowledge has expanded on reflection, I now know that it's so important to become successful in life.
I use reflection in my geography inquiry, reflecting on what I did in Dartmoor.
Grit. We use grit by not giving up when times became tough. When the going gets tough, the tough gets gritty. In our inquiry, we use grit by making more and more drafts, and we kept going to stay with the timetable. I first did the inquiries very slowly and without grit, but I realised that when we went through the process, I was falling behind. I then noticed that I had to use grit in all of the inquiries. It was a challenge, but I think I'm much better at using grit now.
I use grit throughout the inquiry process by pushing myself on and completing it. If I didn't use grit, I would only have a half-written inquiry by now.
I use grit by keep going with my inquiries, even it is challenging, but I did ask for advice when I needed. At the start of the inquiry process, I nearly wanted to give up, but I used grit to keep going. Now I'm more confident to tackle the problems, and I would never give up on them.
Risk-taking. We use risk-taking because we haven't really done anything like these inquiries before. At the start of all of the inquiries, we took a huge risk in doing them, which has made me super confident now, and I'm always able to use risk-taking when I'm given challenges. At the end, we all felt proud of ourselves for being able to make that big step.
I took a risk when doing my history inquiry. This is because at first I didn't set much work for myself, but soon I decided to take on the most challenging task.
I have used risk-taking in every inquiry I have done. This is because I didn't run away from the challenge and I gave my best effort. At the start of an inquiry, I have taken a risk for doing the first inquiry we need to do. In the end, I'm very used to taking risks, therefore I will taking risks more often than before.
The learning powers we use. Personally, I think the learning power I use the most is independence. This is because I spent a lot of time working on my inquiry alone. The learning power I most improve, both in the inquiries and in making this presentation, is reflection. This is because I spent a lot of time looking back on my inquiries after finishing, so that I could improve in the next one. The learning power I still need to develop is collaboration and communication. This is because this will be a vital place in school and in the workplace.
The learning power I used most to complete my inquiries was independence, because this helped me finish my inquiries by myself. The learning power I found most challenging was reflection, as I was struggling to reflect on my previous inquiries. So therefore, the learning power I need to develop the most is reflection, so I can learn from my mistakes and improve on them.
The learning power I found the most challenging was reflection, because I had to look back on my inquiries to see if I needed to improve anything, which is a really hard job, as you have to be honest with yourself to tell yourself if you need to change something or not. The learning power I developed the most was independence. This is because in my first inquiry, history, I had to ask for lots of help. Then in my last inquiry, RS, I barely asked for any help and I did lots in my free time. The learning power I need to develop most on is grit, because in most scenarios I really want to give up, but I know I can't.
The learning power I found the most challenging was grit, because I found my first inquiry hard, but I didn't give up and I did it to my best of my ability. The learning power I have improved from the beginning to end was reflection, because after I did the first inquiry, I reflected on what have I done well and what I can do even better, and I took that to my next inquiry to make sure I don't make the same mistake again. Same for the third inquiry and for future inquiries. The learning power I need to develop the most is risk-taking, because during geography inquiry fieldwork, I realized that I'm not that comfortable taking risks.
What have we learned as a learner? As a learner, I've learned that I can complete challenging tasks as long as I use grit.
I have learned that to be able to improve ourselves, we have to look back and reflect on our previous inquiries. We bring our newfound knowledge to improve in the future.
I've learned that I'm capable to complete a challenging inquiry in the time limit if I stay to the timetable roughly. This will help me in a couple of years, as planning is an important skill in the workplace.
I have learned that if I focus on doing something, I can do that thing very well.
What have we learned about ourselves? I have learned that I'm massively more independent than ever before, as doing these inquiries has helped me develop this skill. I believe this will help me hugely in my later life.
I have learned that reflection is so important. This is because we can learn from our mistakes and use them to do better in the future. Without reflection, we repeat ourselves time and time again. We can't move forward without looking back.
I have learned that if I can make a good plan about the inquiry and put 100% of my effort, I can make a good result.
I learned that I can independently research and write an inquiry with a limited amount of time. I think I'm a kinesthetic learner because I find it easier to do things to learn. For example, we went to the River Dart to collect the information, so therefore I knew what to do.
I think I'm a visual learner. I find it easier to remember things by looking at pictures and watching informative videos. For example, when I did my geography inquiry, I used graphs to look at my data effect.
I think I'm an auditory learner. This is because, in both in my RS and history inquiry, I found I remembered things better if I listened to someone saying it, and found reading documents unengaging.
I find it easier to use 2 or maybe all 3 of these techniques to learn. For example, in my history inquiry, I watched a documentary and noted things down at the same time. This could also be known as dual coding.
Future improvements. For my next inquiry, I could spend a lot more time writing and researching for the inquiry. For example, I could do it when I don't have anything to do. I also could have asked a teacher or a friend for advice if I needed help. And most importantly, I could have followed a timeline to complete the inquiry. Because instead of creating and following a timeline, I just did bits of writing and bits of research and just threw new information in.
In my next inquiry, I could spend more of my free time doing work or catch up when I fall behind. I learned to not waste time in lessons and preps, use the time wisely. Also, I need to do enough research, plan, and structure well on the topic I'm doing before I start writing.
In my next inquiry, I need to read through it more to make sure that I don't have silly errors in it, like if paragraphs are not made and it's just one block of text. I need to do more in my free time, so I'll be able to stay with the timetable better. In each section of the timeline, do the best of your ability, because for the plan in my RS inquiry, I barely did anything and I fell behind, but I was lucky enough to be able to catch up with the group.
In any future inquiries or essays, I would definitely make a timetable, because time becomes so precious when it's a deadline. I would also check more thoroughly through my work, economically careless or grammatical mistakes. If I did the inquiries again, I would use more the help of others, using communication and collaboration to receive constructive feedback.
How can we use our PSB learning powers and our experience from the inquiries in the workplace and out of school life? Later on in life, collaboration and communication is a key skill that employers will look for, because in most jobs, you'll have to work with other people, and if you don't have good collaboration and communication skills, you'll be as good as working alone.
We use independent in the workplace to be able to work by ourselves, and it will help us to become more confident as a person. Independent is also an important skill that all employers are looking for.
In our future life, reflection will be a key skill. This is because our experience is worthless, and as we look back on the positives as well as the negatives to improve. There is not much point in taking on more challenging tasks until we are able to look back and reflect on the smaller ones. An employer is not looking for someone who makes the same mistakes time and time again, but someone who learns, someone who reflects.
We use grit in the workplace because without it, we will not be able to achieve our goals, as we will not strive for them, and we won't have a passion for anything in life. We'll never be able to achieve our full ability without grit. We use risk-taking in the workplace because it makes us reach for high goals in our lives. For example, when we started the history inquiry, we had to take a huge risk because we haven't really done anything like this before, so we took a massive step up the ladder of success.
Thank you
Thank you for listening.